Shalom and good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, Israel calls on the United Nations and international actors to help facilitate the orderly transit of Palestinians from the town of Rafah before the IDF's looming offensive into the border town. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell blatantly calls on the United States to end its military support for Israel. The Islamic Republic of Iran calls on the Muslim world to destroy Israel by essentially targeting its economy. The IDF is pressing on with its offensive in the Gaza Strip and is preparing for an expansion of its ground maneuver into the town of Rafah, which is the last bastion of the Islamist Hamas. Israeli officials have said that an operation in Rafah would only start after the civilian population will evacuate elsewhere, and agreements had been reached with Egypt about dealing with the tunnels that run beneath the Philadelphia corridor, which is the main subterranean artery for smuggling of weaponry from the Egyptian territory into the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Israel called on international organizations to assist Israel in relocating the civilian population from the town of Rafah to prevent Hamas from using Gazans as human shields.
We urge UN agencies to cooperate with Israel's efforts to protect civilians from Hamas and evacuate them from a war zone where terrorists are trying to use them as human shields. Don't say it can't be done. Work with us to find a way. We are now approaching a ground offensive in Rafah because Israeli forces have already successfully swept through most of the Gaza Strip from the north. Hamas started this war with 24 battalions. 18 of those have now been shattered. 2 are on their last legs in Khan Yunis, and that leaves 4 inside Rafah. We're talking about 3/4 of Hamas's battalions that have been shattered, therefore, with over 12,000 terrorists who have been killed. When you take into account the number of terrorists who have been wounded or apprehended, that is more than half of Hamas's fighting force knocked out of action.
The Israeli government spokesman went on to deplore the United Nations and international actors for essentially calling on Israel to forgo its national security right, which includes the complete destruction of the Islamist Hamas terrorist organization, instead of finding tangible solutions to the complexities at hand.
In telling Israel not to attack because civilians will be hurt, but then resisting efforts to get civilians out of harm's way, they have rendered themselves complicit with Hamas's human shield strategy and told it that that strategy works and to keep going. The United Nations and international actors now face a fateful choice. Do they want to save Hamas or save Palestinian civilians? They cannot stop Israel from dismantling the last 4 Hamas battalions in the Gaza Strip and securing the release of the 134 remaining hostages after the October 7 massacre. But the decisions they make now can still protect civilians from the war that Hamas has brought on them.
Meanwhile, in Brussels, the European Commission's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, exploited the public stage to voice his known disdain for Israel, as well as its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, by voicing a passive-aggressive reproach of Jerusalem's call to relocate Palestinian civilians from the last bastion of Hamas in the town of Rafah.
But Netanyahu doesn't listen to anyone. They are going to evacuate. Where? To the moon? Where are they going to evacuate these people? So if the international community believes that this isn't a slaughter, that too many people are being killed, maybe they have to think about the provision of arms.
The EU Foreign Policy Chief, whose lack of any military experience, determination to revitalize the 2015 nuclear agreement with Iran, alongside his radical Marxist background, seemingly obscures his judgment regarding his mandate vis-à-vis European interests at large and EU-Israel relations in particular.
But let's be logical. How many times have you heard the most prominent leaders and foreign ministers around the world saying too many people are being killed? President Biden said this is too much on the top. It's not proportional. Well, if you believe that too many people are being killed, maybe you should provide less arms in order to prevent so many people being killed. Isn't that logical?
Irrespective of the blatant advice prescribed by Josep Borrell, U.S. President Joe Biden, following a meeting with King Abdullah II of Jordan, reiterated Washington's resolve to allow Jerusalem fulfill its objective for the war against Hamas.
Today, the King and I discussed with our senior foreign policy staffs what the issue that's front and center in the Middle East and well beyond. The war between Israel and the terrorist organization Hamas. Over 4 months ago, on October the 7th, Hamas attacked Israel in an act of sheer evil, massacring more than 1,200 innocent women, men, and children. The deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. More than 250 hostages were taken. 134 are still being held hostage by Hamas. We don't know how many are still alive. The anguish that their families are enduring, week after week, month after month, is unimaginable, and it's a top priority for the United States to bring them home. I've made clear the United States shares the goal of seeing Hamas defeated and ensuring long-term security for Israel and its people.
While highlighting the pain and loss of Israel since the Islamist Hamas perpetrated its heinous massacre upon southern Israel on October 7th, the American leader also highlighted the pain and loss of the civilian population of the Gaza Strip.
After October 7th attacks, Hamas retreated back into Gaza, where its leaders live in underground tunnels stretching for over 100 miles beneath civilian infrastructure, including schools, playgrounds, and neighborhoods. The past 4 months, as the war has raged, the Palestinian people have also suffered unimaginable pain and loss. Too many of the over 27,000 Palestinians killed in this conflict have been innocent civilians and children, including thousands of children. And hundreds of thousands have no access to food, water, or other basic services. Every innocent life in Gaza is a tragedy, just as every innocent life lost in Israel is a tragedy as well. We pray for those lives taken, both Israeli and Palestinian, and for the grieving families left behind.
It is important to know that the figure of approximately 27,000 killed in Gaza is the official number which the Islamist Hamas released and which factors in the 12,000 terror operatives that were eliminated by the Israeli Defense Forces as well. Separately, President Biden further addressed the U.S.-led efforts to implement a humanitarian pause that aims to secure the release of the 134 Israeli hostages who are still being held captive in the Gaza Strip in exchange for far-reaching Israeli concessions that would also include the release of hundreds, if not thousands, of convicted terror operatives with blood on their hands.
As the King and I discussed today, the United States is working on a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas, which would bring an immediate and sustained period of calm to Gaza for at least 6 weeks, which we could then take the time to build something more enduring. Over the past month, I've had calls with Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as the leaders of Egypt and Qatar, to push this forward. The key element of the deals are on the table. There are gaps that remain, but I've encouraged Israeli leaders to keep working to achieve the deal. The United States will do everything possible to make it happen.
An Israeli delegation headed by Mossad Director David Barnea traveled to Egypt, where they met with CIA Director William Burns, Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al Thani, and Egyptian General Intelligence Director Abbas Kamel, during the course of which some progress has been reportedly made since Israel presented a new draft of its position that reflects certain flexibility on Israel's part. Turning to Tehran, where Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi addressed supporters of the Ayatollah regime on the 45th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. While addressing the Islamic Republic's aspirations to defeat the United States throughout the Middle East, the Iranian president also emphasized that in the regime's point of view, the Jewish state of Israel is already doomed.
هر روزی که بمباران‌ها قطع بشه که هر چه زودتر باید بمباران‌ها بر مردم مظلوم غزه قطع بشود از بین رفتنی است. فقط می‌خواهند زمان را بگذرانند و الا مرگ رژیم صهیونیستی فرا رسیده.
President Raisi went on to call upon the Muslim world to reinvigorate hostilities vis-à-vis Israel, insisting that proactively blocking Israel's economy would ultimately destroy the Jewish state.
دولت‌ها هم بدانند اون چه رهبری فرمودند راه از بین رفتن رژیم صهیونیستی و بازدارندگی رژیم صهیونیستی از جنایت قطع همه روابط اقتصادی و معادلات با رژیم صهیونیستی.
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. It is important to highlight that TV7 Israel is a donation-based non-profit ministry with all of our productions available free of charge. Therefore, if you're blessed by our daily updates and would like to help us bear the costs, please consider making a donation. You can do so by visiting our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Separately, I'd like to encourage you to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hessen wishing you an Erev Mevorach, and God willing, we'll see you during our upcoming TV7 Israel updates. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.